Hey, I'm Rovius. Today I will introduce you to 7 tips catered towards beginners and people who struggle to survive and don't starve together. Just as a disclaimer, I'm not saying that this is the only way to play the game, since there are literally a million valid ways to play the game out there, and I don't usually min-max anyway. This is just my personal take on it, and it's a topic that I'm very often asked about during my streams. Also, even if you might be familiar with, for example, tips number 1 and 2, I still encourage you to watch the video till the end, since you might not have heard about tips number 5 or 7. Tip number 1. The game is called Don't Starve Together. However, starvation is still one of the top reasons new players die to in the early game. Butterflies are an extraordinary, however often overlooked food source. With 9 hunger value and 8 health value, they're not only excellent to keep your survivor well fed, but can also restore your health reliably should you lose some of your precious health points early on, or even in later stages of the game. They can be a bit tricky to kill though. The trick is to walk up to them first and then force an attack, which requires to use the force attack command, which is by default set to Ctrl plus F hotkeys on PC. Tip number 2. Besides food, darkness and the ever-lurking night monster, aka Charlie, poses a considerable threat to newer players. However, a lot of players tend to both waste a lot of valuable time and resources early on to produce light at night. I highly recommend to use torches in the early game to keep Charlie at bay, as opposed to a campfire or a fire pit. Using a torch in your early nights does not lock you in place and does not make you waste time, but rather allows you to continue exploring the map and even pick up things. If you need to mine, chop, hammer or dig with a torch being your only light source, you can always just light a nearby tree on fire to provide you light needed to execute the action that requires a tool. Tip number 3 also relates to light. New players are often scared to explore the caves in the early game, or at all for that matter. But I do highly recommend to get into the caves very early on in a playthrough to grab a couple of light bulbs and use them to craft a lantern at an alchemy engine. In DST, you can find light bulbs right next to any cave exit in the caves, so it literally only takes you seconds to acquire the necessary resources to craft one. Oftentimes the area next to an exit is lit up even at night, so there is hardly any real danger to your survivor there. A lantern is just such a vastly superior light source compared to torches or fire pits, as they can be refilled easily, have a decent light radius and can be dropped on the ground to light up an area when you need to perform any other actions or combat. I always like having a number of backup lanterns in my base. Tip number 4. Cave entrances, aka sinkholes, aren't just incredible for allowing you to craft and refill lanterns, but in my opinion, it's generally an excellent idea, or even for me personally, a must-have to build your base near one. I highly recommend to anyone who struggles with survival to settle near one. Just leave a couple of screens worth of distance in between it and your base, so you don't have to bother with the bats trying to kill you, who come out every day at the beginning of dusk. You can also completely take care of the bats automatically by building a rabbit hutch next to it. The bunnymen living in the rabbit hutches will easily take down all the bats every night. Just be careful not to have any meat on your survivor when you're near the bunnyman, as they have very strong opinions about that. Also, did you know that you can completely avoid a hound attack if you enter a sinkhole within the usual 30 seconds it takes for a hound wave to arrive after they announce themselves via barking? You will miss out on the teeth and monster meat or even the gems from that particular attack. But in certain situations you just aren't prepared for combat, or maybe you're just sick and tired of dealing with them for the millionth time. It's just important to actually enter the sinkhole before they show up. Tip number 5. Since we just talked about how it's a good idea to settle near sinkholes, I want to continue pointing out how I generally recommend to get a good grasp of your map layout before settling down, by scouting extensively early on. A lot of beginners tend to settle very early on in a new world, which is generally not a good idea in my opinion. You don't need to unveil the entire map, but knowing where a lot of important points of interest are can prove to be very valuable information when it comes to choosing where to settle down. I personally often try to settle down near as many of my favorite points of interest as possible, such as the Dragonfly Desert, the Deciduous Biome, the Moonstone, Lunar Island, the Oasis Desert, the Swamp, and many others. I just don't enjoy walking long distances from place to place. Other than that, I also sometimes enjoy settling directly in the Dragonfly Desert, as the constant abundance of tumbleweeds provides you with a never-ending flow of grass, twigs, and other valuable resources like gears, sometimes even rare gems or even trinkets quite often, which you can exchange for gold by trading with the picking. In tip number 6, I want to talk about how having a decent supply of basic resources is absolutely invaluable. Rather than carrying around every single tool you could use in a certain situation, like an axe, pickaxe, shovel, razor, pitchfork, etc., it's in my opinion much more reasonable to keep the resources needed to craft them on you, to avoid cluttering up your inventory and to allow your survivor to still have a lot of free room in your inventory in order to pick up valuable items you find on your travels. Twigs and grass are absolutely indispensable, and I advise you to keep at least 20 plus pieces of each with you at all times. Beyond that, it's a matter of preference. I tend to mostly carry grass, twigs, flint, but also pigskin to craft football hammers when needed with me at all times. In later stages of the game, I sometimes replace the grass for ropes and have bundling wraps with me as well. Tip number 7 is all about keeping your inventory clean and well organized. Don't Starve Together is excellent at throwing sudden dangers at you that you quickly have to react to in a certain manner in order to avoid death. If you have to search for your weapon, armor, light source, food, walking cane or other essentials in a messy inventory during a moment of panic, you might find your survivor biting the dust much sooner than you'd wish. I personally like having my essential resources at the far right corner of my backpack, and I like having my weapons, tools, light source and walking cane on my far left corner of my survivor's direct inventory. Did you know that you can use the number keys to quickly swap in between different character equipment? Being able to quickly access whatever tool, weapon or other item your character might need in a situation of danger can save you valuable time and allow you to stay in control of a threatening situation before it gets out of hand. That is going to be it for my list. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video or found it useful. If that was the case, I'd be grateful for you to leave me a like and a sub. Comment down below if you have any more tips to share or if you do things differently than I. And you can also find me on Twitch at twitch.tv/Rovius. Take care, everyone.